This morning we went to the Hollywood Cemetery and we had a meditation there. And for those of you who did go with us, I think we brought somebody with us. I get certain signals when someone is around, and I have been feeling, you too? Yeah. And so let's just take a moment to tune in to that someone. And what I often find is that as many people who are here physical and on Zoom, there are others who are joining us via another form of Zoom. But one wants to get our attention. Just like yesterday, I felt at the end, I felt Dr. Stevenson's energy. It was so palpable. I hope you didn't see the tears running down my cheeks, but
We did.
You did?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
We got it on film.
So, to whoever is here, we welcome you, we bless you, and we honor you. You know, one of the things I love about this organization that we've created is, and several people mentioned it yesterday, is creating safe space for people to talk about these things openly without being judged. And I've heard some pretty crazy stories, seemingly crazy stories, but I've had a lot of things happen in my life that people would say I'm crazy. But to have sacred space where we can share these experiences, it doesn't matter where we are. It doesn't matter how many people are in the space. It's such a blessing. And when I had a calling 30 years ago to be a minister, and I said, oh God, you got the wrong person. And to test that calling, I said, if you want a funky minister, I'm in. And I heard my howdy doody cheering squad, give me a cheer. And so I went through, I got my ministry. This is my ministry.
Hi, Nikki.
So what I want to do today is tell you a little bit about, I'm not going to cover the bulk of the book. What I'm going to cover, the Cosmology of Reincarnation and Rebirth. I cover a brief history of reincarnation and the evolution of past life regression. Now, there's things I could not put in the book because I wanted it to be a more scholarly piece of work. And what I did was I stayed with archaeological evidence or historically documented evidence about all of the things that are in the book. And what I could not also put in the book is how divinely guided I was to every piece of evidence. I didn't know at the time, in 1985, there something started. And in 1985, what happened was my first trip to China, and I was standing on the walkway over the excavation of Banpo. It's in Xi'an, China, and Xi'an is more known for the terracotta soldiers, but our group got to do this tour of Banpo. This was before I awakened. I knew I had paranormal skills, gifts, whatever, but I had not awakened yet in 1985. I was on the fence, like many people are. I was on the verge. But in Banpo, standing on that boardwalk, I had an out-of-body experience. And everything in me leaped out of my body and flew over to this distant part of the Banpo excavation. It's a very large excavation, and I wanted to dig something up. And I had no clue. You know, I had to come back into my body and move along with the group. And so I had no clue. But years later in a documentary, I discovered that they put certain people in their tribes when when the flesh deteriorated, they took the bones and they put it in a vessel, clay vessel this big, and they would bury it in front of their huts to have the spirit of that person with them. Well, Banpo features in the book as one of the early places that has recorded evidence of people having ancestral rituals, having shamanic rituals and connection with the deceased. In doing the research for the book, what I found was, in fact, the very first entrance goes back to, are you familiar with Rising Star Cave? It's in Africa. Lee Burke. It was the main archaeologist there. And in the Denali Caves, and this was 200,000 years ago. Think about that. And so I start there because that was the oldest documented case I could find. And I build up to present day. In present day, there's wonderful scientific research being done about reincarnation. So that to me is so exciting. I had in 1993, I had a spontaneous, what is called a life between life, an LBL experience. And in that one, so 1990 was my awakening. 1993, I had the spontaneous LBL experience where I remembered the life just before this one, little Anne Marie, who was a young girl in France who was killed during the Holocaust. But what was so powerful about that experience, even though there was this horrific death, I won't even describe it to you, but what was beautiful about that experience was as soon as her spirit left her body and was floating above the scene, she showed me such compassion for the man who killed her. And having that experience, it made me want to know how this all works. If reincarnation is real, I don't need to prove it. I've had enough experiences, you know, the lived experience, but I wanted to know how it works. And so that's why I've been, for 34 years, I've been focused on the cosmology of reincarnation, piecing together all of these pieces of the puzzle to show how it works. And I'm sorry, I'm not keeping up with the slides here. Most of you know me, so I'm not going to go over my background, except to say that every step along the way was so divinely orchestrated and brought me to where I am now. As passionate as I was about being an interior designer, I let it go with love. And now I'm 100 times more passionate about what I'm doing now than I ever was as a designer. And you might can feel that. I get excited. I'm going to skip this video. I'm going to, I'll post it so we'll have it. Because we're running a little bit, we started late, so I'm going to skip the video.
This is going to blow your mind.
All right, now I'm skipping it. One more thing before I get into the principles that I discovered through my experiences, and we'll get into this second part in our journey later. The other part I could not put in the book because I could not find enough data to back it up. So in all the experiences are what's called anecdotal, but it's probably one of the most exciting things that I have experienced, and what I know I came into this lifetime to do, and that is reincarnating twice in the same lifetime. Reincarnating twice in the same lifetime. I see the question marks over your head. That started happening to me early on, and I wondered what the heck was going on, but I'll tell you more about that later. So I created several principles, based on what I observed, what I experienced, a lot from my own experiences. But as a regression therapist, I got to listen to other people's stories. And as a networker, I got to listen to more stories. And so I just, start filing all of these things in files. And I knew that one day it was going to amount to something. Just like with my past lives, that I started, creating files to put the pieces of the puzzle that I was remembering, because those of you who are remembering, they come in snippets. Rarely do they come in movie form. And, it's sort of like a series. You get to an interesting part, and then it's like to be continued. Yeah, and then sometimes it's years before you get that next episode.
And not necessarily in chronological sequence.
That's right. Yeah.
Back and forth.
So principle number 1. Everyone is creating their own cosmology. In other words, I'm going to share with you what my cosmology is, but I'm not saying to you, do not make this a dogma. I mean, I'm saying to you, do not make this a dogma. You have to discover your cosmology for yourself. And there are some similarities we've discovered through, the ancient teachings of the Vedics, through the Taoist teachings. We have discovered that there are some similarities, but what I've discovered in the last few years, especially when I started 34 years ago, it seemed like we were in a stuck mode. But the last 5-10 years, it's like we are flying. And I feel it's because there's so much growth, spiritual growth of consciousness, that, excuse me, it's making us move faster. So principle number 2, and early on, I had this experience, and I've had it over and over again, and it stays consistent. To be able not only to remember a past life, to remember, to be able to go in between lives, but to go into oneness, to experience oneness, source, Tao. It's even beyond what people call God. You won't hear me use the word God too much, because when you experience oneness, it's beyond everything. And so what I discovered was that we individuate out of oneness. It's our choice. We're not kicked out of heaven. Whatever those old legends are, we literally choose to individuate out of oneness, and Earth is one of the planes that we individuate to. My belief is that it is an honor to come to Earth. Even though there are struggles, This is only the beginning stages of what we are evolving this earth to be. If you look back over the history of the way the earth was created, if you look over the history of even our physical bodies, to move into being bipedal, to move into having brains large enough to handle consciousness in the way that we know it today, it's amazing. And in my first QCE experience, which Smita led me in, I had this visual of what it felt like to move, to individuate. So that's the picture that's up there. Now, this is a picture of that someone did. It's a super magnified photograph of what's inside a single cell. And I love this picture because it looks like a piece of modern art. But that's, the universe, the oneness, gives us things in ways that we can understand. And so in that moment, in that journey, it showed me this picture. I knew this picture. I had seen it before. And so I was thrilled that it came up because it made sense to me. Your experience of oneness and individuation may be completely different. The fingerprint was a great symbol of how individual we are. There's no two fingerprints, every leaf is different. Every snowflake is different. We're different. And what a wonderful universe to create such diversity. Isn't that awesome?
Yeah, it is.
So that's a good thing that we went back to that. I try to see the positive in everything.
I was just remembering in the Nadi reading, they take it thumbprint.
Did you have a question?
I do actually. Can you define cosmology?
Yeah.
Repeat it. Yeah, the question was to define cosmology. And what cosmology is a system, basically a system. And so as there are cosmologists who try to figure out how the world works. And then there's subsets of that where, physicists are trying to figure out how quantum physics works and how that makes everything else work. And so I thought that's a perfect word because I wanted to know how the system of reincarnation works. I'm an organized person, and with my design background, it's logical to me to know how something works. So great question. Thank you.
Is theory synonymous with that?
Not exactly. And
Theory of a system?
theory of a system, there are similarities, but when you talk to people who do theories, they will talk about, okay, you build a hypothesis and then you get enough evidence that you create a theory. Theories are more evidential based. Cosmology can also be more philosophically based. So I kind of blend, I use the scientific method with what I do. So I blend the evidence, I get enough data, and by some methodology, it would not be enough data, but I know the feeling of energy and the feeling of truth. And so when I get enough data that I feel comfortable with it, here's the other thing. If you've got a system and you work the system and you see the results of that, now you've got something to work with. So this is one of the reasons why I wanted to know how it works. If reincarnation is real, and I had problems with the old teachings about reincarnation. So this is why I say the growth, the evolution of these things has been important. Principle number 3, We're here of our own free will. So every choice builds up, you know, the law of cause and effect, action, reaction. And the beautiful thing about reincarnation, the belief in reincarnation, is to know that your action now may not happen, the reaction may not happen, the effect may not happen in this lifetime. It may take other lifetimes to happen. And vice versa, some of the things that we're experiencing now, as Hatar referred to, are things that we set up, caused in other lifetimes. So to know that, hey, you know, you have free will. One of the things that it helped me to understand is that free will, free choice is really empowering. You know, I grew up with, the reason why I got into this work was to heal trauma from my childhood, not realizing that trauma from my childhood actually triggered trauma from past lives, and not having supportive parents. I had to wait until I was an adult, until I started having these awakenings. I believe our lives have a purpose. It's one of the reasons why I wanted to end the panel discussion yesterday with that question, and let people from different perspectives, you know, answer that. I believe, I, as a cosmologist, I believe that all of us have a purpose to remember that we come from source. Think about it. 8 billion plus people on the planet. How many people do you think remember they come from source? We're lucky. You know, we're in a group of people who are either have that or want it or a knowing about it. But there are a lot of people who have no clue at all. Once you remember you come from source, then you realize you came to earth with a purpose. And that goes back to individuation again. But the bigger purpose, the common purpose, is to manifest that divinity. You coming from source means you come from the divine, to manifest that divinity in your life in whatever way you choose. It can be a simple way, it can be a magnanimous way, it can be whatever. And so that's how I live my life. It's like, how can I manifest the divine in everything I do? Everything, even the challenges. And the divine is unconditional love. So we're here to manifest unconditional love. I've sort of jumped ahead a little bit, but the other thing, being a medium, I get to have a more intimate, unique connection with the non-physical world. Now, I don't think I'm special in being a medium. I believe as we remember who we truly are, we all will open up to those skills. And just like we have, you know, we don't just have this ball of earth, third rock from the sun. We need that sky around us, and the moon, you know, the gravitational pull between the moon and the earth is critical. And with all of the planets, we need that beyond this physical body. And to me, that's, you know, very representative of the I call it, to keep things simple, I call this the physical world, the non-physical world. And so what I'm trying to do now in my experiences is map out what the non-physical world is like. We don't have enough information about that. And, you know, just like I mentioned in the beginning, there's someone here with us from the non-physical world. And what I'm finding is that beings in the non-physical world are having openings just like we are. And I'm getting covered with goosebumps. They are having openings too. And some of you are in my classes and you've experienced that as well. Those beings who are opening up. And they, like those of us in the physical world, they're looking for their tribe, places where they can speak freely and be vulnerable, be their true selves. So I love being able to communicate with them. Now, here's one of the premises that I have that's different from many of the ancient teachings. You know, for me, there is no eye for an eye. To me, that's a misunderstanding. And there's no judgment. Think about how many religions, you know, talk about judgment day. And I was raised Christian on my mother's side, Buddhist on my father's side. I wasn't raised in the Buddhist, but my father was Buddhist. So I was exposed to both of those things. And, you know, in Buddhism, my first experience, my awakening was flying to the 10th hell of the Buddha, where my father was. And only to let him know there's no judgment. All you have to do is forgive yourself. And in that moment, his hell dissipated, completely dissipated. He had created it for himself. So there is no judgment, but there is accountability. And I think of it as like a ledger. You know how you have a bank ledger? You put money in, you got a positive side on your account. You take money out, you know, it starts taking away from that. And if you use credit cards, your credit builds up, your charges build up. And I really think about, they say how much debt the US has, how much personal debt individuals have. I think that's a call for us to work on our karma. And when we clear our karma, our debt clears up. And remember, I said all of these principles that I discover, I work them. And there was a point in time where I carried some credit card debt. And I didn't work on that. I didn't work on paying that. I mean, I did, you know, the way you're supposed to, but I knew that that would not go away until I worked on it internally. And sure enough, I worked on it internally to the place where I don't have that credit card debt. I pay it off every month. So that's maybe a thought you had not considered before. Principle number 7, as we integrate our true self, there's even a higher purpose to express and to share. So not only are we here to manifest our higher purpose, but think about it. There's a saying about, you know, that God created the earth and humans to have because he wanted a relationship with beings. And so you know, if you look at the essence of that, the divine wants relationship. And look, and here we are. We all, you know, there's times in our lives where we crave relationships. But once we get past that lower energy craving, then we realize, oh, we're all here for a reason. All of us who have come to this symposium, we have a like-mindedness that we're here for a reason. We have touched one another's lives as part of our life purpose. And I know that there are times when we make super connections, just as, you know, when Smita and Tiffany and I met, we really connected, and we knew that, you know what, our purpose is a collaborative. And so it's wonderful to finally find relationships like that, and still, instead of the ones where you have to, oh yeah, that again.
Mhm.
So I mentioned this before about that we're expanding, we're evolving. Think about the difference in the 1600s when Galileo and Copernicus created the telescopes, and they began to see things in the sky, and then they began to say, wait a minute, the planets don't revolve around the Earth, they revolve around the sun. And you know what that did? Got them into a little bit of trouble, but eventually, you know, humanity caught up, and that was, you know, a system. But before that, 1,000 years prior to, they went with the Ptolemy system, and they really believed that, you know, all the planets revolved around the Earth. Today, we have James Webb telescope that is showing us even more. I love looking at the photos from the James Webb telescope. I posted one just recently, and it's like art to me, just like that single cell thing, you know. It's just wonderful. So reincarnation, the way I see it, is an open-ended system. As we evolve, it's evolving, and epigeneticists will tell you that, you know, everything is affecting everything else. These words we're putting out are having an effect on the universe, the global mind. We're all connected in ways we can sometimes only imagine. Each incarnated being carries a collection of imprints of aspects orchestrated by one's oversoul. Now, those of you who have studied the Seth material are familiar with the word oversoul. And when I was asking my higher self in the universe, what is a soul? There's much confusion about what is a soul versus what is spirit. So I've stayed away from all of that. I look at what most people call souls as a stream of consciousness. And you heard Jim mention that. And if you look at I asked him last night at dinner, is what he's talking about like Buddhists call the energy that moves from incarnation to incarnation, streams of consciousness. And in that stream of consciousness are the information, the data. And so I imagine that the oversoul says, let's work on these particular things. You know, think about a menu. I want one from a Chinese menu, one from column A, two from column B, you know, maybe one from column C. These are all the things I want to work on in this lifetime. Okay, that information gets imprinted on that stream of consciousness, and that makes up you. And you can look around at your life and look at the challenges, look at the things that come easy, and you'll begin to see what your imprints are. So for me, for instance, at 11 years old, I had this vision of being an architect. I wanted to be an architect so bad. I had never been exposed to architects in this lifetime. I was on a farm when this came to me. I had been picking cotton all morning. You know, you take a long lunch and a siesta in between going back out to the field. And I was sitting there by myself under this oak tree, had this vision of becoming an architect. Totally out of the blue. The universe must have heard my call, because this was during the summer. The next year in sixth grade, in our library, we get a book about Frank Lloyd Wright. And I said, that's the kind of architect I want to be, an organic architect. Well, long story short, I did not become an architect. I switched to interior design, but I found out why I had that urge as I began remembering my past lives, that in my another lifetime, I was one of the 8 generations. This is the largest architectural design house, 8 generations of imperial architects for the last 8 Qing dynasty emperors. That's where that came from. That memory was imprinted in my psyche, but I was meant to use it in another way. One of the cool things that I forget if it's generation 5 or 6, his name was Lei Jingshou. Another thing he did besides being an architect was that he organized events. And so I knew that's where he wanted me to put my energy. Isn't that cool?
Here you are.
And here I am. Principle number 10 is there are patterns, as a designer and someone interested in architecture, you look for patterns and you see them over and over. So forgetting, there's many legends about this whole forgetting. People say, well, if we reincarnate, why don't we remember? Why don't all of us remember it? Have you thought about that question? There's a myth that you drink from the river, Leth, and that's the drink of forgetfulness. And in the Chinese culture, there's a legend about if you drink cold water before you die, that you'll forget. And there's a story about this one person who didn't want to forget, so he didn't drink the water. And then he came back remembering. For me, I feel like, so think about this. This is the way I interpret this. Have you ever had a realization that, oh, I've been carrying that subconsciously? That's a pattern that I've been carrying around. And all of a sudden you bring it up to conscious awareness. So to kind of give you an example, part of my childhood trauma was that we ran away from my father. We ran away from him twice. And I was very young. The first time I was 2 years old. The second time I was 9 years old. And my mother had also run away from her home when she was a teenager. So I had the cellular memory, but I had this young child memory of running away. In my adulthood, it bubbled up to the surface. Oh, I had this pattern of when there are problems, you run away. See, so that subconscious experience came up to consciousness. It's a choice. Some of us work on those subconscious things, but a lot of people do not. A lot of people don't want to look at them. And the same thing is true for this veil of separation. You have the choice to remember that separation, just like you have the choice of remembering things that are hidden in the subconscious. As I said earlier about the experience of being an architect in another life, and there were a couple of other lives that I remembered being an architect as well, and so that was a theme that was in this lifetime. The next one you'll probably relate to, bonding both positively and negatively with someone. And I had a negative bonding with my own parents because subconsciously I remembered that they had been abusive to me in another lifetime. So part of my healing that relationship was remembering that and forgiving myself for the curse that I put on them and in that lifetime. And, so pay attention when you feel very strongly negatively or positively towards someone. And like with Smita and Tiffany, I've always felt such a positive thing. We don't remember yet where it was, but we definitely have a positive connection. And I feel like part of what we're doing now is completing something that we started in other lifetimes that maybe we weren't able to finish. And so, boy, it sure feels like we're coming into completion about that, doesn't it?
Sure.
And Tom and I have, I just heard his voice on a radio show. And he was on that radio show several times. And I said, I reached out to the host and I said, who is that person? Is it possible that I reach out to him? And I didn't know that he lived in Richmond. And so Steve connected Tom with my email, and then we've been friends ever since. And then, as I mentioned earlier, karma for me is not about retribution. It's not about judgment. It's about just balancing ourselves. And I like the Egyptian goddess Maat, M-A-A-T, where, she has the scales and there's a feather on one scale and there's the human heart on the other scale. And when the human heart is equal to the feather, that's a wonderful symbology of this balancing. So to kind of give you an idea about that, think of someone that just rubs you the wrong way, brings the fur on your back up, right? And now turn that imagery around as a mirror and say, where in me? Oh no, I've lived a good life in this lifetime. I'm not like that. Where in another life was I like that? And if you can, and even if it doesn't come up, just have a sense of feel in your body, is this truth? And then you can just say, you know what? Let me forgive that aspect of myself that is calling to be healed. Now, this other principle, building up and breaking down. When we have a repeat of a karmic event, but we do not pay attention to it, the energy builds up. We have another opportunity. It can happen in one lifetime. It can happen in multiple lifetimes. The energy will build up and will build up until, like for me, it was the cosmic 2x4 that finally got my attention. And I'm not alone. I hear that all the time. And then once you have the aha moment, that epiphany that says, oh, wait a minute, I have a part in this. It's not about being a victim. I have a part in this. There's a lesson I'm learning here. For me, it was forgiving my parents and owning what I did in that other lifetime, even though they abused me. It's what I did to myself in that other lifetime. I killed myself in that other lifetime to escape another escape theme. And then once you have that epiphany, now the energy starts breaking down. So when I first had that realization, I didn't get rid of it 100%. But the universe just orchestrates this, brings this right to you, another experience, but now a lesser experience. And now you have some awareness and you say, whoa, I think I'll get this one this time. And you come at it with a new attitude. And then you still might not have all of it. You might need one more thing. And all of a sudden, you'll realize, oh, wow, this is a non-issue. I feel completely neutral to this subject. And now you have healed that. And once you've healed that, what I like to think of it is that it frees up your energy, and it creates a beautiful vacuum. So when I'm doing healing work and we're doing this, I like to acknowledge that vacuum and bring divine love into the vacuum, because when you do that, now you bring your next highest energy into yourself. And then that's where the magic starts happening, and the grace. Sometimes we can see a lesson, we can see it in someone else's experience, and we say, I got that. Yeah, I'm not going to do that kind of thing. And to me, that is just grace in action. That experience with my father in the 10th hell really taught me a lot about constructs. The hell that he had created for himself. It did not look like the paintings that the classical paintings that I saw when I did research about the 10th hell. But it was the hell he created. And then when he forgave himself, and it pixelated, I hope I can find a way to create the visual of that, but it pixelated. And then what happened was this monastery appeared after the pixelation. And because he was Buddhist, the monks came out, put a brown robe around him, which means to take refuge in the Buddhist. So even, like many people, Christians, Buddhists, Hindu, Muslims, Druze, you have a system, but you don't live it. You don't understand it, you don't live it. And so that was the case for my father. Even though he was born in a Buddhist system, he didn't follow it necessarily. So time is a construct. It's but in the non-physical world, it's a construct that can be changed instantaneously. In the physical world, once we develop our skills, we can work with the construct of time also. Give you an example of that. I said I do energy work. I was running late for an appointment one time, and my client called me. So I said, okay, I'll be there in a moment. Before I left the building, I sent light ahead of me, cleared the path. What normally would have taken 15 minutes to get there, I was there in about 5. Yeah, no traffic, just no red lights, just go. Well, that was a unique, I think that was like beginner's luck.
Right. Mhm.
Consciousness is a portal. Think about that. Who was it that created the time machine? I mean, there have been multiple ones, right? And I love it in that movie Contact, where they created that, spent all that money creating that device. She did it right there in consciousness. And the device even dropped, and they lost a few moments in their timeline. But that's what I love about meditation, about regression therapy, about hypnotherapy. It helps us understand, utilize that portal of consciousness. We can be present to these bodies, and that's what we'll have an experience later today. We can know these bodies are sitting in these chairs. We can hear the extraneous sounds. And at the same time, we can be really embedded in this other experience. And it feels so real that we've forgotten about this physical body sitting in this room with other noises around. So I love expanding consciousness.
Who came up with that statement? Is that a classic?
Wow.
You did?
Yes. Yes, I kept hearing I guess I should credit my students. I kept hearing the students say something about, this is a portal, this is a portal. And you and I have said that
Yeah,
too.
that's right.
And I said, yep. We don't need to make a machine. We don't need to make a Faraday cage. If you know what a Faraday cage, a non-sensory chamber. No. And I've had some of my best experiences in loud, noisy venues. When you can get your consciousness so focused, you can do it anywhere. Yes.
When you say consciousness, are you talking about your attention?
Attention is an aspect of consciousness. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we focus so much on intention, because that is saying to your consciousness, I want to align, and the way we do it is I want to align with my soul, with the universe, with the divine. Now, we've all had the experience of wanting something and setting, some people do treasure maps, vision quests, and I've been in groups where they did it, but they did not first connect with their divine. And so I've learned the difference between just doing it from your egoic mind, your ordinary consciousness, as opposed to stopping, breathing, taking a moment to focus on the divine mind. And what I do is I get quiet and I listen for what the divine mind, my oversoul,
That is the oversoul you're talking
the oversoul, yeah. Oh, you were reading my mind. Oh, cool. When I connect with the divine mind and it says, focus on this. You remember that still small voice that is talked about in so many traditions? When I hear that still small voice and I feel its energy, I know, I don't know how I know, but I know. That's what I want to focus on. And as an energy worker, I've learned to focus on what resonates with truth for me and what does not. And so one of the things I've learned is don't waste time on things that do not resonate with me. And then that gives me more energy to focus on the things that do resonate with me.
Can I raise a question?
Yes,
about.
I'll repeat it. Go ahead, I'll repeat it.
Sometimes I find that
Mm.
what I would emotionally like to have happen versus what I should be doing or what should happen on a different level. What almost invariably is preferred is my feeling towards the thing. Like if it's something I really want to happen,
Yeah.
it's
So
like that's the confirmation that
let
I'm
me
aligned.
let others
Yeah.
know what you're saying. So Lawrence is saying that when he has a feeling about something versus what was
Something I should do.
the shoulds, shoulda, woulda, couldas,
Mhm.
Yeah.
when so in essence what you're saying is the energy of what resonates, but you have a feeling about it. I don't necessarily have a feeling about it. I get a knowing. But I bring this up because that's your process. That's my process. They're both right.
Yeah.
We all, and this is the thing, we all have our own process. And this is why, even though I'm saying to you, this is my cosmology, some of it may resonate with you and some of it may not. So I want you to think over any of the principles that did not resonate with you, anything that you felt wobbly about questioning, And jot that down. Do it right now. Oh, I'm running a little over. Sorry. Okay, we're going to wrap up. I wanted to give you an experience of your cosmology. All right, this is a statement by Joel Witten and Joe Fisher. Our one fundamental aspect, the privileged few who have visited the interlife receive, is the same unrelenting message. We are thoroughly responsible for who we are and the circumstances in which we find ourselves. We are the ones who do the choosing. So I'm creating a cosmology journal. This is one of the pages in the journal. So your question is, what does knowing you choose your circumstances mean to you? Just take a few moments to think about that. What does knowing you choose your circumstances mean to you? And we'll take a little break and then you can carry that thought. So I leave you with these tips. Pay attention. The universe is giving you clues, just like we played a little scavenger hunt this morning at the Hollywood Cemetery, because I didn't give enough directions, but I said, oh, I wanted to do a scavenger hunt. This is it. And every experience is teaching you something about love. Even the experiences you do not like, teaching you about love. And I think, any questions online? Oh, we'll go there first.
None right now, but I'll.
Any questions in here while we're waiting? Yeah, John, come on up here. I love your questions.
Love,
No, come all the way up here.
love.
We're
Love,
Smita.
love to me means I like something a lot. I don't think that's what you're referring to.
Mm-mm.
So that I don't know why the word is used in that context.
Mm,
For you and anybody else that writes about this stuff,
Yeah.
I've never got it.
yeah.
You know, God is love. Well, God does a lot of crappy stuff. You know, and a lot of stuff that I don't like. I think it's something different. It's my
It
take on
is. Yeah. Come back around. Thank you for saying that. Remember that experience I told you about of being in oneness? I'd had a challenging life up to that point, dealing with post-trauma from the childhood, 3 failed marriages that I created for myself because of the trauma from my childhood. I was repeating the patterns. And then I had that experience of oneness. I never felt love in my life like I felt in that moment. And so rather than just calling it love, for me, it was unconditional love. And I realized that's what we're all searching for when we're looking for love partners, for love relationships. And it's been my guidepost throughout my life. And I knew that I've not been in a relationship since that last divorce, a permanent relationship. And I knew that I would need to be evenly yoked, you know, evenly yoked. Are you familiar with that terminology? When you have a yoke on two animals, it needs to be set evenly. This is a farm term.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm a farm girl at heart. And they need to be evenly yoked, or one of the animals is going to get hurt. So that's what I want in a relationship. I'm putting it out to the universe. Hasn't happened yet, but maybe. If not in this lifetime, I'm planting the seeds for another lifetime for that type of relationship, because I know that's what we are really searching for when we want true love. We say that word true love, but what we really mean is true unconditional love. That's what we're searching for. Great question. Thank you.
I have a suggestion, maybe you could use the word bliss or ecstasy.
That means something different for me. You're free to use it.
No, but I mean for John, you know, he said he couldn't, you can't
I feel
understand.
that language is inadequate to discuss
Yeah.
these things.
That's a very good point. When I was in that oneness, I thought, how do I describe this to anybody? And one of the things I noted about that energy was it was this beautiful bright light, but as a designer, we're used to like lighting, having, hot spots in certain places, shadow areas in other places. There were no hot spots. There was no shadow. This was even, beautiful, titillating light. That was one thing I noticed right away. And then it was like, as soon as I acknowledged that, it was like I was enveloped in this unconditional love. It took my breath away. How do you put words to it? Yeah. And I felt this infinite connection with everything that, again, I cannot begin to describe that. And then I felt this infinite connection with this body that I chose to be in. And for the first time in my life, and I was in my 50s when this happened. So it tells you how old I am. And but
5 years ago, wow.
and it has changed me forever. Yeah, yeah. But we humans, we try to put things into word. When you have been around anyone who's had that experience, it's like, how you, with an iPhone, you can connect with another iPhone. It's like that. You don't even need words. You just sit in the energy of that other person. And it's a beautiful experience. And then for someone who's not had the experience, there's no way you can really give it to them. All I do is hold the energy that hopefully you'll have that experience. And I've had that happen in my classes, that people have gone there. So that was a beautiful thing.
Were you meditating at the time, or was it just
Yeah.
haunting?
Yeah. Well, let me say, a question was asked here, was I meditating when I went into the oneness? And yes, I was. And in our class. Oh, hold on one second.
I was going to comment that in my experience. it
Oh, you
takes-
got to come up here and say. And Pat, if you would get in the queue.
I'm just saying that's the final word that is. In my experience, one of the things we have so much trouble with is just the trust issue.
Mm.
And once you release all these parameters you put around yourself and your emotions and your structures, your programming, whatever you want to call it, and you just release yourself to that trust, that's when this happens. And it is a joy so profound that it just rises up in you. And what
Ding, 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 we're having that experience.
when to get there, again, it's all this has to be all this. All this has to be gone, and all this has to come forth. And it's a trust, it's a willingness to step into that trust. It's knowing that you are, every one of us is divine,
Yes.
in my perception.
Yeah.
Every one of us is divine, and it's not separate like humans think we are. We are all of one part and piece. And when you allow yourself to be part of that whole, you will experience this. And it's, again, it's the most profound joy, the most profound feeling of energy welling within you and expanding out.
Thank you so much, Kathy. Oh, that was beautiful. Beautiful.
We have a question from Joanne online.
A question from John Ray.
Yeah, she says, what are the 3 biggest stumbling blocks to enlightenment you see over and over as you're working with people?
Wow.
Great.
We need a whole nother session for that one, but we're going to have an opportunity. We're going to keep that question in December. We're going to have a reincarnation symposium reunion, and we can all share our thoughts about that. That would take too long to answer, but as Kathy said, you have to let go. You have to trust. And for me, I got the word surrender just, before I had the oneness experience. I got the word surrender. Now, I wasn't raised in the Buddhist culture. I knew how to bow, to kowtow to my elders. But in the Buddhist culture, there's a thing called a full prostration. And in that moment when I surrendered, I had to do a full prostration. And it said to the universe, I completely give my life over to the divine. Yeah. And people are afraid to surrender. I'm so sorry. I forgot to stop the share screen. I'm in an altered state, if you can't tell. And that's all I had to, what was the?
You just said it, alternate state to me is very, very close to meditation. I
Yeah.
can't tell the difference when I'm in it.
Yeah. And when I teach about meditation, I go through the various levels of altered states of consciousness. We're in beta most of the time. Now, probably in this group, we're slipping into alpha, just because of the energy. But in ordinary consciousness, you're in beta, but there's all those different levels. And so, yes, states of consciousness, they've shown, this is what they're doing in the scientific research now, showing how the levels of consciousness can be measured.